The dog was still waiting. When they found the Dacia Duster that Monday afternoon, parked on a forest track 3 miles from where it should have been, the Spaniel Collie Cross was inside. Alone. Windows closed. Engine off. His owner had simply walked away. And 3 days before Christmas, in the quiet woodlands of the Scottish Highlands, James Paton vanished. No one heard him call for help. No one saw him stumble. No one witnessed whatever happened in those woods on December 23, 2019. But someone knows something. Because in a place like Kiltarledy, strangers stand out. And on a Monday afternoon in winter, when daylight dies early and the cold settles into your bones, a 72-year-old man doesn't just disappear. Not without leaving something behind. The morning started the way most mornings did for James Paton. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would suggest this day would be different from any other Monday. Nothing that would make you think, years later, people would still be searching. Kiltarledy sits 12 miles west of Inverness, cradled on the south bank of the Bryac Burn, a tributary that feeds into the River Beauly. It's the kind of village where everyone knows your name, where your routine is observed not out of suspicion, but out of familiarity. Population, under 1,000. The kind of place where a missing car gets noticed within hours. James, known locally as Jim, was a familiar figure in the area. 72 years old. Stocky build, about 5'5". Gray hair, gray beard. Wore glasses. The sort of man you'd pass on a woodland path and exchange a nod with. A quiet presence. He loved walking his dog. It wasn't a hobby. It was ritual. The kind of dependable routine that defines a life in the Highlands. Every day, the same rhythm. The same roads. The same woods. And on December 23rd, at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, he did exactly what he always did. He got in his car. He drove to the woods. He took his dog. But this time, he never came home. December in the Scottish Highlands is unforgiving. The sun rises late and sets early. By 4 in the afternoon, the light is already draining from the sky. Shadows stretch long across the fields. The temperature drops. The wind picks up. Winter doesn't announce itself here. It simply arrives, and it stays. On that Monday, the weather was cold but not extreme. No blizzard. No ice storm. Just the ordinary chill of a Highland December, the kind locals dress for without thinking. James was prepared. He'd lived here long enough to know the land. He knew the woods. He knew the paths. His family would later tell police he stuck to recognized trails. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to wander off into dense undergrowth or scramble up hillsides. He knew where he was going. And yet, somehow, he didn't come back. Beauly sits just 2.5 miles north of Kiltarledy. It's a small town, historic, built along the River Beauly. The river itself is wide and powerful, fed by highland streams, carving through forested valleys before eventually reaching the Beauly Firth and the North Sea beyond. The woods around Beauly, particularly Ruttle Woods, are dense. Scots pine, birch, thick undergrowth in places. Paths wind through them, some well-trodden, others barely visible. It's beautiful, in the way wild places are. Quiet. Isolated. But isolation cuts both ways. In summer, these woods are alive with walkers, cyclists, families. In winter, especially just before Christmas, they're emptier. Fewer footprints. Fewer voices. If you called for help in Ruttle Woods on a December afternoon, how long would it take for someone to hear you? Hours. Days. At around 1:30 p.m. on Monday, December 23rd, James Paton was captured on CCTV at a filling station in Beauly. It would be the last confirmed sighting of him. The footage shows him as he was, ordinary, unremarkable. A man running an errand. A man going about his day. Nothing in his posture, nothing in his movements, suggested distress. No indication that in a few hours, his face would be on missing person posters. He filled up. He paid. He left. And then he drove toward Ruttle Woods. The woods sit on the south side of the River Beauly, accessible by narrow roads and farm tracks. It's a landscape locals know well. Rolling hills, patches of dense forest, the river cutting through it all like a vein. James knew this area. He walked here regularly. His family confirmed it. He had favorite routes. He understood the terrain. So when he drove his Dacia Duster, variously described by witnesses as blue or silver, down Fenelon Farm Road toward Ruttle Woods, it wasn't an impulsive decision. It wasn't unfamiliar ground. It was routine. Or it should have been. Somewhere between 1:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m., Something happened. 3 hours. That's the window. That's the gap in the timeline where James Paton's life intersects with mystery. He left Beauly. He drove to the woods. He parked his car on a track near Upper Fenelon, close to Ruttle Woods. And then he walked away. Without his dog. When they found the car at around 4:30 p.m., it was parked neatly on the track. Not crashed. Not abandoned in haste. Just parked. The dog was inside. Unharmed. Waiting. The engine was off. The doors were closed. But James Paton was gone. Let's pause here. Because this detail, the dog left in the car, is critical. If you're someone who walks your dog regularly, you know the routine. You park. You let the dog out. You walk together. You return together. The dog goes back in the car. But James didn't take his dog with him. Why? Was he planning to come right back? Did he step out for just a moment, thinking he'd return in seconds? Or did something prevent him from taking the dog at all? Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy true crime stories like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The first calls to police came in that evening. By nightfall, which in December in the Highlands means around 4 o'clock or 4:30 p.m., James hadn't returned home. His family grew concerned. This wasn't like him. The phrase police would later use, again and again, completely out of character. Not the kind of man who disappeared. Not the kind of man who caused worry. Dependable. Predictable. And yet, his car had been found. His dog had been found. But James Paton had not. Police Scotland mobilized quickly. Officers from Beauly Police Station, supported by teams from Inverness, began searching the area around Ruttle Woods. They brought dogs. They brought search teams. They brought equipment. But the Highlands are vast. And Ruttle Woods, even as a specific location, covers a significant area. Dense trees. Uneven ground. The river nearby. As darkness fell on December 23rd, the search had only just begun. And time was already running out. Hypothermia is a silent killer in the Scottish Highlands. Even in moderate cold, temperatures just above freezing, a person who is injured, disoriented, or unable to move can succumb within hours. The body's core temperature drops. Confusion sets in. Motor skills fail. And if you're alone in the woods, with no one to hear you, with night falling fast, the clock doesn't stop. Every hour mattered. By the morning of December 24th, Christmas Eve, the search had expanded. Dundonald Mountain Rescue Team was called in. These are specialist volunteers, trained for Highland terrain. They know how to navigate forests, hillsides, rivers. They understand the land in ways most people don't. HM Coast Guard Helicopter 951 from Inverness joined the effort, sweeping the area from above, using thermal imaging to detect body heat below the tree canopy. Search dogs from Police Scotland and the Search and Rescue Dog Association, SARDA, Scotland were deployed, trained to pick up human scent even in challenging conditions. And the community rallied. Locals, people who knew James, people who'd never met him, turned out in droves. They combed through the woods. They checked paths. They searched out buildings, sheds, barns, anywhere someone might have sought shelter. On Christmas Day, more than 110 volunteers joined the search. 110 people, spending Christmas Day in freezing woods, looking for a man they hoped was still alive. But Ruttle Woods offered no answers. Days passed. The searches continued. Police divers scoured the banks of the River Beauly. Firefighters assisted. Specialized units were brought in. And still, nothing. No clothing. No footprints leading away from the car. No signs of a struggle. It was as if James Paton had stepped out of his vehicle and vanished into the air. By January 2020, the case had shifted. The intensive, daily searches slowed. Resources were finite. The terrain had been covered, recovered, searched again. Police released the CCTV image from the Beauly filling station, hoping someone might remember seeing James after that. Did he speak to anyone? Did anyone see where he went? The appeals continued. The family's anguish deepened. But the woods kept their secret. The River Beauly runs cold in winter. Fed by highland streams, it moves fast, carving through rock and forest on its way to the sea. In some places, it's shallow enough to wade across. In others, the current is strong enough to pull you under. And in December, if you fall in, you have minutes. Maybe less. Police divers entered the water on December 27th. They searched the sections of the river closest to where James's car had been found. The banks, the deeper pools, places where someone might have slipped, fallen, been swept away. The River Beauly has claimed lives before. Fishermen who waded too far. Hikers who misjudged the current. The water doesn't care about experience. It doesn't care about intention. But the divers found nothing. No clothing snagged on rocks. No signs of disturbance along the muddy banks. No body caught in the eddies beneath overhanging trees. If James had gone into the river, it had taken him completely. Or he'd never been near the water at all. By the end of December, more than 200 volunteers had participated in the search. 200 people. Think about that for a moment. In a rural community where the population of Kiltarlity itself barely reaches 1,000, 200 people gave their time, their Christmas, their warmth, to search for a man many of them had never met. They walked through frozen fields. They pushed through dense undergrowth. They called his name into silence that never answered back. They searched because in a place like this, a missing person isn't just a statistic. It's a neighbor, a face you recognize in the village shop, a person who belongs to the fabric of the community. And when someone goes missing 3 days before Christmas, it hollows out the holidays for everyone. Inspector Eastlaw Campbell of Police Scotland's North Division led the investigation. In her appeals to the public, she was measured, professional, but you could hear the urgency beneath the calm. "We are working tirelessly to trace James and reunite him with his family," she said in one statement. Notice the wording. Trace James. Not locate James's body. Not recover remains. Because at that point, even as days turned into weeks, there was still hope. There had to be. But hope is a difficult thing to sustain when the land gives you nothing. Search teams had covered Ruttle Woods extensively. They'd moved outward in expanding circles from the car. They'd checked farm buildings, sheds, derelict structures. Anywhere someone disoriented or injured might have sought shelter. They'd deployed thermal imaging from helicopters. They'd used search dogs trained to detect human scent even in freezing conditions. They'd done everything right. And still, James Paton had not been found. Let's talk about the terrain. Because if you've never been to the Scottish Highlands in winter, it's hard to understand how a landscape can swallow someone whole. Ruttle Woods isn't a manicured park. It's working woodland, dense in places, open in others. The ground is uneven. Roots cross the paths like tripwires. Moss-covered stones hide ankle-breaking gaps. There are sections where visibility drops to a few meters because the canopy is so thick. Where streams cut through the forest floor, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden beneath fallen leaves. In summer, you might hear other walkers. In December, you could be completely alone. And if you're 72 years old, if you've slipped and fallen, if you've injured yourself and can't walk, how far off the path would you need to be before searchers miss you? 10 meters? 20? The woods themselves aren't vast, not by Highland standards. But they're part of a larger network of forest and farmland that stretches for miles. Ruttle Woods connects to other patches of woodland. Paths intersect with farm tracks. The river winds through it all. If someone became disoriented, say, if they left the main path and tried to take a shortcut, it would be easy to end up somewhere unexpected. And in winter, when everything looks the same, when the light is fading, when the cold is numbing your thinking, the familiar can become foreign very quickly. But here's what doesn't fit. James knew these woods. His family confirmed it. He walked here regularly. This wasn't new territory. This wasn't a place where he'd get lost easily. And he wasn't reckless. According to those who knew him, James stuck to recognized trails. He didn't go off-piste. He didn't take unnecessary risks. So what happened? Did something, or someone, cause him to leave the path? There's a detail that police have never fully explained. Why did James drive to Ruttle Woods that day? It wasn't his closest walking spot. There were paths nearer to his home in Kiltarlity, places he could have walked without getting in the car at all. So why drive 3 miles to Ruttle Woods specifically? Was it just preference? A favorite route? Or was there another reason? Some people suggested he might have been meeting someone. There's no evidence of this. No texts. No calls. No witnesses who saw another vehicle. But the thought lingers. Because when someone parks their car in a relatively remote spot and then vanishes, the question of why they were there becomes important. Was this a routine walk? Or was James Paton going to meet someone he knew? Let's consider the dog again. Because this is the detail that haunts the case. If you're going for a walk in the woods with your dog, you take the dog with you. That's the entire point. But James left his spaniel collie cross in the car. There are a few possible explanations. 1. He was only planning to step away for a moment. Maybe to check something. Maybe to investigate something he'd seen. And he intended to come right back. 2. Something happened immediately after he got out of the car. Something that prevented him from letting the dog out at all. 3. He deliberately left the dog behind because he was going somewhere the dog couldn't or shouldn't follow. None of these explanations feel complete. Because if he was coming right back, what stopped him? If something happened immediately, what was it? And if he deliberately left the dog, why? By mid-January 2020, the active search had scaled back. This doesn't mean police gave up. It means the resources required for daily, large-scale searches, helicopters, dive teams, volunteer coordination, couldn't be sustained indefinitely. The case shifted to investigation mode. Police continued to follow leads. They reviewed CCTV from the area. They spoke to residents. They analyzed James's phone records, his bank activity, his movements in the days before he disappeared. Nothing unusual emerged. No large withdrawals of money. No strange calls. No indication of distress or planning. James Paton's life, right up until the moment he vanished, looked exactly like it always had. Normal. And that's what makes this case so unsettling. Because we expect disappearances to have warning signs. We expect there to be something, some clue, some hint, that explains what happened. But sometimes there isn't. Sometimes a person just stops existing in the world, and everything before that moment looks unremarkable. In February 2020, police made a renewed appeal. They released more details. They asked anyone who had been in the Ruttle Woods area on December 23, 2019, to come forward. Dog walkers, cyclists, anyone who might have seen something, no matter how insignificant it seemed. A car parked on the track, a man walking alone, another person in the woods, anything. One witness did come forward. They reported seeing a man matching James's description walking in the area that afternoon. But they couldn't say exactly where, or exactly when, or what direction he was heading. It was something, but it wasn't enough. Here's what we know for certain about James Paton's last confirmed movements. 1:30 p.m., CCTV captures him at the filling station in Beauly. He's alone. He appears calm. Sometime between 1:30 and 4:30 p.m., he drives to Ruttle Woods and parks on a track near Upper Fenelon. Around 4:30 p.m., his car is discovered. The dog is inside. James is not. 3 hours. That's the window. In those 3 hours, a man disappeared. Let's think about what could happen in 3 hours. You could walk several miles. You could drive somewhere else and come back. You could have a medical emergency. You could fall and be unable to get up. You could encounter someone. You could make a decision that changes everything. The medical emergency theory is one of the most discussed. James was 72. That's not ancient. But it's an age where sudden health events become more likely. Heart attacks, strokes, falls that result in serious injury. If James had collapsed somewhere in the woods, even just off the path, he might not have been visible to searchers, especially if he'd fallen into dense undergrowth or a depression in the ground. Hypothermia would have set in quickly, and if he'd been disoriented, say, from a stroke or head injury, he might have wandered further from his car, away from the paths, deeper into the woods. This theory makes sense in many ways, but it doesn't explain why he left the dog in the car. If he got out of the vehicle, intending to walk, why wouldn't he take the dog? Unless something happened immediately upon exiting, before he had a chance to open the back door. But what? Another theory, an accident. The ground near Ruttle Woods is uneven. There are streams, ditches, hidden drops. In winter, moss-covered rocks can be as slippery as ice. If James stepped wrong, slipped, fell into a stream, or down a slope, he might have been injured too badly to call for help. And in the cold, unconsciousness would come fast. But again, search teams covered the area extensively. Dogs would have detected a body, even if it was concealed by vegetation or water, unless the river took him, unless he fell in somewhere upstream and was carried away before anyone even knew he was missing. There's a darker possibility, too, one that people whisper about but rarely say outright. What if James didn't plan to come back? What if leaving the dog in the car was intentional? A way to make sure the dog was found, cared for, safe? What if James Paton walked into those woods knowing he wouldn't return? Suicide is always difficult to discuss, especially in cases where there's no confirmed outcome. but it's something investigators have to consider. The question is, was there any indication James was struggling? Publicly, there's been no suggestion of this. His family described him as engaged with life. There were no reports of depression, no financial crisis, no terminal diagnosis. And it was 3 days before Christmas. Would someone choose that timing? It's possible. People in crisis don't always think about timing the way others might. But there's no note, no goodbye, no definitive evidence pointing in that direction. Just the haunting image of a dog waiting in a car and a man who never came back for it. Then there's the possibility no one wants to say out loud. What if someone else was involved? Foul play. It's the explanation no one wants to consider. But in any missing person case, it has to be examined. Because sometimes people don't vanish because of accidents or health emergencies or personal choice. Sometimes they vanish because someone made them disappear. Let's be clear about something. There is no evidence that James Paton was harmed by another person. No witnesses reported seeing anyone else in the area. No signs of a struggle were found near his car. No suspicious vehicles were captured on CCTV. But the absence of evidence isn't the same as evidence of absence. And in a case this strange, every possibility has to live in the space of maybe. Think about the location. Ruttle Woods isn't a busy thoroughfare. It's not a place you stumble across by accident. The track where James parked his car, near Upper Fenelon, isn't visible from main roads. You have to know it's there. Which means anyone else in that area that afternoon would likely have been there deliberately. A dog walker, a cyclist, someone who knew the woods, or someone who knew James would be there. Police never confirmed whether they investigated the possibility of a planned meeting. But it's a logical question. Did James tell anyone he was going to Ruttle Woods that day? Did he arrange to meet someone there? And if so, did that person ever come forward? The problem with rural crime, if crime occurred, is that there are fewer witnesses, fewer cameras, fewer people to notice when something doesn't look right. In a city, if someone goes missing, there's CCTV on every corner. There are phone records showing their location minute by minute. There are dozens of potential witnesses. In the Highlands, you have silence. And silence protects nothing and no one equally. Here's what bothers investigators in cases like this. The car was found parked. Not hidden. Not crashed. Not burned. Just parked. The dog was unharmed. If someone wanted to harm James Paton, why leave the car there? Why not drive it somewhere else, somewhere more remote, to buy time? Why leave evidence behind it all? Unless it wasn't planned. Unless whatever happened, happened suddenly. Let's walk through a hypothetical. James parks his car. He gets out. Maybe he sees someone he knows. Maybe he doesn't. A conversation happens. It escalates. An argument. A confrontation. Something physical. James is 72. Not frail, but not young. If someone wanted to overpower him, they could. And then what? If you've just harmed someone in the woods, what do? You hide the body. You cover your tracks. But in dense woodland, with uneven ground and limited time before dark, how well can you hide someone? Searchers covered the area extensively. Dogs were deployed. Helicopters used thermal imaging. If James had been killed and left in Ruttle Woods, the odds of him remaining undiscovered for this long seem slim. Unless he wasn't left in Ruttle Woods at all. There's a version of this story where James never walked into those woods. Where he got into someone else's vehicle. Where his car was left behind as a decoy. It's speculation. Pure speculation. But it fits the facts in a way other theories struggle to. It explains why the dog was left behind. There wasn't time or opportunity to deal with it. It explains why no trace of James has been found in the woods, because he was never there. It explains the 3-hour window, time enough to drive somewhere else, do something, and return to abandon the car. But it raises an enormous question. Who? In cases like this, investigators look at the people closest to the missing person first. Family, friends, anyone who had regular contact. Not because they're automatically suspects, but because statistically, when foul play is involved, the perpetrator is usually someone the victim knew. But there's been no indication that James's family or friends were anything other than devastated by his disappearance. No reports of conflict. No financial motives. No suspicious behavior. Which leaves the possibility of a stranger. And stranger abductions, especially of elderly men, are exceptionally rare. So we're left with questions that have no answers. If James was harmed, who did it? If his body was moved, where is it? If someone knows something, why haven't they spoken? Let's shift perspective. Because while investigators were working through theories and search teams were combing the woods, there was a family waiting. A family who went to bed on December 23rd thinking their loved one would walk through the door any minute. A family who woke up on Christmas Eve to the sound of helicopters searching overhead. A family who spent Christmas Day wondering if James was alive, cold, calling for help somewhere no one could hear. We don't know much about James's family. They've maintained privacy, which is completely understandable. They didn't ask to be part of a mystery. They didn't ask for their grief to be public. But police statements reference them throughout. His family are understandably distressed. We want to reunite James with his loved ones. This is an incredibly difficult time for everyone involved. Understated language for unimaginable pain. Imagine waiting for news. Every phone call could be the one. Every knock on the door could bring closure. But days pass, then weeks, and the news doesn't come. In missing person cases, families often describe a specific kind of torture. If someone dies, you grieve. It's painful, but there's a process. Rituals, funerals, a way to say goodbye. But when someone is missing, you exist in limbo. Are they alive? Are they dead? Are they suffering? Are they somewhere safe, unable to communicate? You can't grieve fully because there's still hope. But you can't hope fully because reality is pressing in. It's a suspension between two unbearable possibilities. And it doesn't end. By January 2020, the search efforts had quieted. The helicopters stopped flying daily. The volunteer searches became less frequent. Resources were redirected. But the family's wait continued. Every day, the question, is today the day we find out? And every day, silence. The community around Beauly and Kiltarlity didn't forget. In the months that followed, there were occasional renewed searches. Small groups of volunteers would return to the woods, walking the paths again, checking areas they'd checked before. Because people wanted to help. Because doing nothing felt worse than doing something, even if that something felt futile. Local residents shared theories quietly among themselves. Had James had a fall they'd all missed? Was there a section of the river no one had checked thoroughly enough? Could he have walked further than anyone thought possible? Everyone had an opinion. No one had an answer. And then COVID-19 arrived. By March 2020, the pandemic began shutting down normal life across Scotland. Lockdowns were imposed. Non-essential travel was banned. Resources were stretched impossibly thin. And cases like James Paton's, already cold, already exhausted of immediate leads, moved even further from the spotlight. It's not that police stopped caring. It's that the world stopped in a way that made everything harder. For families of missing persons, the pandemic was uniquely cruel. Searches couldn't happen. Volunteers couldn't gather. Investigators couldn't move freely. The waiting, which was already unbearable, became even more isolating. And for James's family, the months turned into years with no resolution. In 2021, Police Scotland confirmed the case remained open. They reiterated their appeal for information. They emphasized that anyone with even the smallest detail should come forward. But by then, the trail was ice cold. Memories fade. Details blur. People move away. And a case that was once the focus of a community's attention becomes a sad, unresolved footnote. Let's talk about the woods again. Because there's something important to understand about Highland terrain. Bodies can remain hidden for years. Decades, even. If someone dies in dense woodland, in a gully, or beneath thick undergrowth, natural processes take over quickly. Animals scavenge. Weather degrades. Vegetation grows over. Within months, a body can become almost impossible to spot, even if you're standing nearby. There are cases in Scotland, and elsewhere, where remains have been found years later, sometimes by accident. A hiker stumbles across bones. A forestry worker clearing land makes a grim discovery. And investigators realize someone had been there all along, just hidden. So the possibility remains that James Paton is still in Ruttle Woods. That he's been there since December 23, 2019. That search teams walked within meters of him and never knew. It sounds impossible, but it's not. Nature is better at keeping secrets than we'd like to believe. There's another possibility, though. One that's equally haunting in a different way. What if James isn't in the woods at all? What if the River Beauly did take him, and he was carried downstream, further than anyone searched? The Beauly flows into the Beauly Firth, and from there into the Moray Firth, and eventually the North Sea. If someone goes into that water and isn't recovered immediately, the current can carry them far. Miles. Tens of miles. And winter water is so cold that decomposition slows. A body can sink, stay submerged. By the time it surfaces, if it surfaces, it might be nowhere near where it entered the water. Divers search the sections of the River Beauly closest to Ruttle Woods. But you can't search an entire river system. You can't search every pool, every bend, every section where the current might have deposited something. It's logistically impossible. So if James did go into the water, it's entirely possible he's still there. Just not where anyone thought to look. As 2021 became 2022, and 2022 became 2023, James Paton's case faded from public awareness. There were no major updates, no new leads, no dramatic discoveries, just silence. The kind of silence that settles over unsolved cases when time makes them feel less urgent, even though for the families involved, every day is urgent. In true crime communities online, on Reddit, on forums, in Facebook groups, James's case occasionally surfaces. People share theories. They analyze the limited information available. They wonder what happened. Some think medical emergency. Some think accident. Some think something darker. But no one knows. And that's the frustrating reality of cases like this. Sometimes there just aren't enough facts to build a definitive answer. Here's what we're left with. A 72-year-old man drove to a woodland area he knew well. He parked his car. He left his dog inside. And he vanished. No body has been found. No evidence of foul play has been confirmed. No clear explanation has emerged. Just questions. Hundreds of questions. And a family still waiting for answers. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with ambiguity. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss. It's the grief you feel when someone is gone, but not confirmed dead. When there's no body, no funeral, no definitive end. You exist in a state of perpetual uncertainty. And the human mind isn't built for that. We need closure. We need narratives that have endings, even if those endings are tragic. Because endings allow us to process, to move forward, to integrate loss into the story of our lives. But when there's no ending, when the story just stops mid-sentence, the mind keeps trying to finish it. For James Paton's family, every day since December 23, 2019, has been a day without answers. More than 5 years now. 5 years of wondering. 5 years of hoping and dreading in equal measure. 5 years of seeing his face and not knowing if he's alive or dead, suffering or at peace. Ambiguous loss does something cruel to memory. You can't remember the person as they were without the disappearance intruding. Every happy memory is now tinged with what came after. Every photo is divided into before and after. And you can't fully grieve, because to grieve is to accept finality. But what if they're still alive somewhere? What if giving up hope means abandoning them? So you stay suspended, waiting for a phone call that might never come. James Paton is not the first person to vanish in the Scottish Highlands. The landscape itself seems designed to swallow people whole. Vast, remote, unforgiving. In 2013, a man named Lachlan McQuarrie disappeared while hiking in the Cairngorms. His body wasn't found for 3 years, despite extensive searches. He'd fallen into a gully that was searched multiple times, but was so steep and overgrown that his remains were invisible from above. In 2007, RAF pilot FLT Lieutenant John Oram went missing while hill walking on Ben Macdui. He was never found. His mother searched for years, leading expeditions into the mountains, refusing to believe the land would keep him forever. It did. In 1933, a young man named Peter Grant vanished while walking near Loch Ness. His body was discovered in 2011, 78 years later, when drought conditions lowered the water level. 78 years. The Highlands keep secrets. Not out of malice, just out of vastness. There's so much space, so many hidden places, so many ways for the landscape to conceal what we desperately want to find. But James's case is different from these in one critical way. He wasn't hiking a remote mountain. He wasn't miles from civilization. He was in a known woodland area, close to roads, close to houses. The kind of place where you might encounter other dog walkers. Which makes his disappearance feel less like the land swallowed him and more like something specific happened. Something we're missing. When investigators reach the point where all obvious leads have been exhausted, they don't stop working. But the work changes. They wait for new information. A witness who didn't realize what they saw was important. A deathbed confession. A random discovery. An unrelated arrest that leads to someone talking. Cold cases occasionally crack open years later because of the smallest things. Someone mentions something to a friend. The friend mentions it to police. A connection is made. Or technology advances. DNA techniques improve. Old evidence is re-examined. Or land changes. Construction crews dig somewhere. Forestry workers clear an area. And what was hidden becomes visible. In James's case, what would break it open? What single piece of information would turn this from mystery to explanation? A witness who saw another vehicle on that track. Someone who knows where James went and why. A discovery in the woods, clothing, remains, anything. Or James himself, walking out of the forest with a story no one could have predicted. That last possibility, the idea that James could still be alive, becomes harder to hold on to with each passing year. Not impossible, just increasingly unlikely. Because if James had amnesia, if he'd started a new life somewhere, if he'd chosen to disappear, wouldn't something have surfaced by now? A sighting, a financial transaction, a medical record. In 2025, it's nearly impossible to live completely off the grid, especially for someone of James's age. You need money. You need healthcare. You interact with systems. Unless you're dead, or unless someone is hiding you. Let's consider the amnesia theory for a moment. It's rare, but it happens. Dissociative fugue states, where someone loses their identity and wanders away from their life, usually caused by severe psychological trauma or stress. But there's no indication James was under that kind of stress. And fugue states typically resolve within hours or days, not years. Could he have suffered a head injury in the woods, developed amnesia, and wandered away? Theoretically, yes. But where did he go? How did he survive? Who's caring for him? It's the kind of theory that works in movies but struggles under the weight of practical reality. Here's what investigators likely believe, though they'd never say it publicly while the case is open. James Paton died on December 23, 2019. Probably in or near Ruttle Woods. Probably from natural causes, an accident, or possibly, though less likely, foul play. His body either hasn't been found because it's extremely well hidden, or because it's not where anyone has searched. That's the statistical probability. Not certainty, but probability. And yet, cases like this have defied probability before. People have been found alive after being missing for years. Bodies have been discovered in places that were searched dozens of times. Explanations have emerged that no one could have predicted. So until there's evidence, there's still the smallest sliver of what if. The woods around Ruttle have changed since December 2019. 5 winters have passed. 5 springs. 5 cycles of growth and decay. If James is there, nature has been working on him. Trees have grown. Leaves have fallen and decomposed. Streams have shifted course. The woods in 2025 are not the same woods they were in 2019. And that makes finding anything exponentially harder. There's a philosophical question buried in cases like this. At what point does a missing person become a memory instead of an ongoing emergency? At what point do we stop looking? For law enforcement, that point never officially comes. Cases remain open indefinitely, but resources are finite. Active searching can't continue forever, so the case becomes passive, waiting for information rather than actively seeking it. For the family, though, there's no such transition. You don't stop waiting. You don't stop hoping. You just learn to carry the uncertainty with you every single day. In the community around Beauly and Kiltarlity, James's disappearance has become part of local history. Not forgotten exactly, but absorbed into the fabric of things that have happened. Older residents remember the searches. They remember seeing helicopters overhead during Christmas 2019. They remember the tension. Younger residents might not know the story at all. And visitors? They walk through Ruttle Woods without ever knowing that somewhere in this landscape, a man vanished. There's something haunting about that. The idea that you could be walking the same path James walked, standing in the same spot where something happened, and have no idea. The land doesn't mark tragedy. It doesn't preserve the moment. It just continues. Over the years, there have been occasional renewed searches. Small-scale efforts, usually organized by volunteers or family members. They walk the paths again. They check areas that might have been missed. But with each passing year, the odds of finding anything decrease. Not to zero. Never to zero. But low enough that hope becomes painful. Here's what keeps people searching, even when logic says it's futile. The need to do something. Because sitting still feels like abandonment. Because searching feels like loyalty. Because giving up means accepting that the answer might never come. And then there are the people who claim to know things. Every high-profile missing person case attracts them. Psychics who say they've seen what happened. Armchair investigators who've developed elaborate theories based on limited information. People who call police with tips that lead nowhere. Most mean well. Some are attention seekers. A few are genuinely disturbed. But they all add noise to an already confusing situation. Police have to investigate every credible tip, no matter how unlikely it seems. Because the one time they don't could be the one time it mattered. So resources get spent chasing leads that go nowhere. Someone thinks they saw James in Inverness. Someone else thinks they saw him in Glasgow. Another person is certain he's living in Ireland. None of it pans out. The frustration for investigators is real. They want to solve this. They want to bring James home, one way or another. But wanting isn't enough when the evidence isn't there. Let's return to the car for a moment. Because there's something we haven't fully explored. When James's Dacia Duster was found, it was examined forensically. Police would have looked for fingerprints, trace evidence, anything that might indicate someone else had been in the vehicle. They've never publicly stated what, if anything, they found. Which likely means they found nothing unusual. Just James's fingerprints. His belongings. His dog. Nothing out of place. But here's a question worth asking. Was the car locked when it was found? This detail hasn't been made public, but it matters. If the car was locked, it suggests James had his keys with him when he left. Which means he intended to come back. If it was unlocked, it might mean he left in a hurry. Or that someone else was involved. Small details like this can change the shape of a theory entirely. Another detail we don't know, James's phone. Did he have it with him? Was it found in the car? If he had it, has it ever pinged a tower since that day? Phone data can be incredibly revealing. It can show movement, activity, even if calls and texts aren't made. But if James's phone was in the car, or if it's never been active since December 23rd, that tells a different story. The absence of certain details in public reporting doesn't mean police don't know them. It means they're holding information back. Sometimes investigators withhold details deliberately, things only the perpetrator would know, in cases where foul play is suspected. Sometimes they're just protecting the family's privacy. Sometimes it's operational necessity. But for those trying to understand what happened, the gaps in public knowledge are maddening. Here's what we can say with confidence. James Paton left his home on December 23, 2019. He was captured on CCTV in Beauly. His car was found later that day near Ruttle Woods. And he has not been seen since. Everything else, every theory, every possibility, is built on inference and probability, not certainty. And maybe that's the hardest part. Not the not knowing, but the knowing that we might never know. The dog waited. That's the image that stays with people who know this case. Not the car. Not the woods. Not even James himself. The dog. Sitting in the back of a Dacia Duster, waiting for its owner to return. Not knowing he never would. Dogs don't understand abandonment the way we do. They don't conceptualize death or disappearance. They just know their person left and hasn't come back. So they wait. Loyal in a way that makes the human heart ache. When the car was found that December afternoon, what was the dog's condition? Police never released those details publicly. Was it calm? Distressed? Had it been barking? How long had it been alone? These questions matter because they might tell us something about when James left the vehicle. If the dog was calm, settled, it might suggest James had only been gone a short time. That the dog wasn't yet worried. If it was agitated, pacing, barking, it suggests a longer absence. Distress building over hours. Dogs have instincts about their owners. They sense things we don't fully understand. Did this dog know something was wrong? Or was it simply confused, waiting patiently for a return that would never happen? There's something profoundly tragic about animals left behind in cases like this. They become symbols of loyalty, of trust broken through no fault of anyone. The dog didn't choose to be left. It didn't understand what was happening. It was just there, in the aftermath of something it couldn't comprehend. After James's car was found, the dog was cared for. We can assume it went to family or friends. Somewhere safe. But imagine being that dog. One day, you're going for a walk with your person, the way you always do. The next day, they're gone. And they never come back. Do dogs grieve? Do they wait at windows? Do they perk up at familiar sounds, expecting someone who never appears? Yes, they do. In some ways, the dog is the only witness to whatever happened. It was there. It saw James get out of the car. If it could speak, it could answer every question we have. Did James walk into the woods? Did he meet someone? Did he seem distressed? But the dog can't speak. So it remains a silent witness to a mystery it experienced but cannot explain. Let's talk about the landscape again. Because if James is still in Ruttle Woods, and that remains a real possibility, the land itself is holding the answer. Highland woodland is deceptive. From a distance, it looks navigable. Paths wind through. Trees are spaced enough that you can see between them. But once you're inside, especially in winter, perspective shifts. The canopy blocks light. Undergrowth thickens in places. What looked like a clear path from above becomes tangled and confusing on the ground. And there are hidden places. Gullies too steep to see into from the path. Depressions in the ground, filled with ferns and moss, that could conceal something unless you stood directly above them. Fallen trees creating natural shelters underneath. Spaces invisible unless you're crouching down, looking. Search teams know this. They use systematic grid patterns. They overlap coverage. They bring dogs trained to detect human scent even through soil and vegetation. But no search is perfect. Terrain resists systematic approaches. Nature doesn't organize itself into grids. And if someone is just a few meters off the path, concealed by natural features, they can be missed. Again and again. There's a phenomenon in search and rescue called search blindness. It happens when teams have searched an area so many times that their brains start to skim over it. They think they know what's there, so they stop really seeing it. Fresh eyes often find things that experienced searchers have walked past dozens of times. Not because the experienced searchers were incompetent, but because human perception is fallible. Could that have happened in James's case? Could he be somewhere that was searched, but missed? It's not only possible. It's likely. Let's consider the River Beauly again. Because water changes everything in a search. The Beauly runs fast in winter, fed by highland runoff. It's cold enough to stop your heart in minutes. And it's deeper than it looks in places. Deceptive. If James went into the river, intentionally or accidentally, his body would have been subject to the current immediately. Rivers don't keep bodies where they enter. They move them. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, depending on flow and obstacles. A body can get caught on submerged branches, wedged between rocks, pulled into underwater hollows. It can stay submerged for weeks, months, even longer. When water temperatures are near freezing, decomposition slows dramatically. A body can remain relatively intact, but it won't produce the gases that typically cause it to surface, which means it could stay underwater, invisible, for a very long time. Police divers searched sections of the river, but you can't search every meter of a river system. It's logistically impossible. And if James went in somewhere upstream, the current could have carried him miles before he became snagged on something. Miles from where anyone thought to look. There are sections of the River Beauly that are deep, turbulent, difficult to search. There are pools where the water is dark and visibility is near zero. There are places where even experienced divers won't go because the risk is too high. Could James be in one of those places? Yes. But here's the other possibility. What if he's not in the river at all? What if he never went near the water? What if the answer is on land, in the woods, and it's just hidden in a way we haven't considered? There's a type of hiding that happens naturally. Seasonal camouflage. In December, when James disappeared, the undergrowth was dormant. Leaves had fallen. Visibility through the trees was better than in summer. But winter brings its own cover. Frost. Snow. Ice. If James fell or collapsed somewhere, and then snow fell, he could have been covered almost immediately. And by the time the snow melted in spring, vegetation would have started growing. Ferns. Brambles. Grass. Within months, nature would have begun reclaiming whatever was there. Forensic experts talk about skeletonization timelines. In the Scottish climate, cool, damp, with active wildlife, a body can skeletonize within a year, which means bones, small, scattered by animals, bleached by sun over time, easily mistaken for animal remains unless you're looking closely. Hikers occasionally find bones in the woods and assume they're from deer or sheep. Most of the time, they're right. But sometimes, they're not. And unless those bones are brought to authorities and examined, we'd never know. It's a grim thought. That James could be lying somewhere in Ruttle Woods, reduced to bones, and hikers walk past without realizing their steps from solving a 5-year-old mystery. But it's possible. Communities process unresolved tragedy in complicated ways. At first, there's collective action. Searches, vigils, appeals. Everyone comes together. Everyone wants to help. But as time passes and no resolution comes, that energy dissipates. People return to their own lives. The intensity fades. Not because they stop caring, but because humans can't maintain crisis-level emotional engagement indefinitely. In Beauly and Kiltarlity, James's disappearance is part of local memory now. People remember it when it's mentioned, but it doesn't dominate conversation anymore. Life has moved on, except for those who can't move on. For James's family, the calendar has become a source of pain. Every December 23rd is an anniversary. Every Christmas is shadowed by his absence. Birthdays he didn't live to see. Holidays he didn't celebrate. Or maybe he did, somewhere, somehow, in a way no one knows. That ambiguity, the not knowing, makes every milestone complicated. There's a particular cruelty in unsolved cases. Families of murder victims, families of accident victims, they have certainty. They know what happened, even if the why remains unclear. But families of the missing have nothing. No confirmation, no closure, no ability to properly grieve. Just an endless, exhausting state of suspended animation. Some families cope by becoming advocates. They start foundations. They push for policy changes. They help other families navigate the nightmare of having a missing loved one. Purpose becomes a way to channel grief. Others retreat inward. They stop talking about it publicly. They protect their privacy. They try to build a life around the absence. There's no right way to do it. There's only survival. And then there are the questions that haunt. The what-ifs. What if we'd reported him missing sooner? What if we'd gone to the woods ourselves instead of waiting for police? What if we'd done something differently? These questions are irrational. The family did nothing wrong. But guilt doesn't follow logic. It attaches to whatever's available. In missing person cases, families often describe feeling helpless. Because there's nothing to do. You can't plan a funeral. You can't sort belongings. You can't move forward. You can only wait. And waiting is the hardest action of all. 5 years is a long time to wait. But it's not the longest. There are families who've waited decades. Who've died without ever knowing what happened to their loved one. And that possibility, that James's family might never know, is perhaps the cruelest aspect of this case. Let's consider what resolution might look like. Not the resolution we want, but the resolution that's realistic. Best case, James is found. Alive, somehow, with an explanation that makes sense. It's the outcome everyone hopes for. It's also the least likely. Second best, James is found. Deceased, but found. There's an explanation. An accident, a medical event, something that provides closure. The family can bury him, can say goodbye, can begin to heal. This is the outcome most missing person families pray for after enough time has passed. Not the happy ending, but an ending. Worst case, nothing. James is never found. The mystery is never solved. The family lives the rest of their lives not knowing. And when they die, the question dies with them. This happens more often than we'd like to admit. There are thousands of missing persons cases in the UK alone. Some are solved quickly. Some take years. Some never resolve. And each one represents a family living in that same terrible uncertainty. James Paton is one name among many. But he's not a statistic. He's a person who existed. Who had routines, preferences, relationships. Who loved his dog enough to walk it every day. Who lived 72 years on this planet before vanishing without explanation. His story matters. Not because it's unique. Sadly, it's not. But because every unsolved case represents a gap in the fabric of the world. A question mark where there should be a period. And as long as the question remains unanswered, people will keep asking. Where did James Paton go? What happened in those woods? Why hasn't he been found? The woods don't answer. The river keeps flowing. And somewhere, in the soil, in the water, in a place no one has thought to look, the truth waits. The Scottish Highlands have a long relationship with disappearance. It's embedded in the culture, in the folklore, in the land itself. People have been vanishing into these mountains and forests for centuries. Some by choice, some by accident, some by forces we'll never understand. The old stories talk about the land taking people. Fairy hills, enchanted glens, places where the boundary between worlds grows thin. Modern minds dismiss these as superstition. But they arose from something real, the empirical truth that people who went into certain places didn't come back. And when you can't explain why, you create stories. Today we have better explanations. Hypothermia, falls, swift water, disorientation. We understand the mechanics of how the landscape can kill. But understanding the how doesn't always reveal the where. And without the where, families are left with the same questions people have been asking for generations. Where did they go? There's a reason search and rescue teams in the Highlands are among the best trained in the world. They have to be. The terrain demands it. Mountains where weather can turn lethal in minutes. Bogs that can swallow a person whole. Rivers that run so fast you can't fight the current. Forests so dense that visibility drops to a few meters. This is the environment James Paton disappeared into. Beautiful, ancient, deadly. Every year, people underestimate the Highlands. They see the photos, rolling green hills, picturesque lochs, charming villages. They don't see the danger until they're in it. How fast the temperature drops when the sun sets. How quickly fog can roll in, erasing landmarks. How easy it is to step wrong and turn an ankle. And how that minor injury becomes life-threatening when you're alone and far from help. James wasn't a tourist. He wasn't unfamiliar with the land. But familiarity doesn't make you immune. Sometimes it makes you complacent. You think you know a path, so you stop being as careful. You think you know your limits, so you push a little further. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Let's talk about what happens to cold cases. Because understanding that helps us understand where James's case stands today. When a case goes cold, it's not closed. That's important to understand. Police don't give up. The file remains open. But the active investigation phase ends. No more daily briefings. No more deployed search teams. No more helicopter sweeps. The case moves to a different status. Reactive rather than proactive. Detectives still assigned to cold cases do several things. They periodically review the file, looking for anything missed. They monitor for new information, tips, sightings, confessions. They wait for technological advances that might help. New DNA techniques. Better forensic methods. They hope for the random discovery. The hiker who finds something. The construction crew that unearths something. But they're not actively searching. Because there's nowhere left to search. For James's case, this likely happened sometime in 2020. The intensive search phase ended. The investigation became a waiting game. And that's where it remains. There's a database in the UK called the Missing Persons Unit. It holds records of everyone who's been reported missing and not found. Thousands of names. Thousands of families waiting. James Paton is in that database. His details. His description. His last known location. And every year, he stays there, unresolved. Some cases in that database date back decades. People who disappeared in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and were never found. Children who walked out of their homes and never returned. Adults who vanished in circumstances that made no sense. Each one a tragedy. Each one a family's nightmare that never ended. But occasionally, very occasionally, cases break open. Someone comes forward with information. Remains are found. A connection is made. And a decades-old mystery is solved. It doesn't happen often. But it happens. That's what James's family holds on to. The possibility that one day, the call will come. That something will be found. Someone will remember something. A piece will fall into place. And they'll finally know. The landscape around Ruttle Woods changes with the seasons. In spring, the trees come alive with new growth. Wildflowers bloom. The forest floor becomes carpeted with ferns. In summer, the canopy thickens. The paths are shaded, cool even on hot days. The river runs lower, slower. In autumn, leaves turn gold and copper. They fall and accumulate, creating layers on the ground. In winter, everything becomes stark. Bare branches. Gray sky. The cold settling in. Each season transforms the land. And with each transformation, anything hidden becomes more hidden. Or occasionally, less hidden. Drought can reveal things. When water levels drop, riverbeds expose what they've been concealing. Floods can move things. What was buried becomes unearthed. What was hidden downstream surfaces elsewhere. Construction changes landscapes. Roads are widened. Buildings are erected. Earth is moved. And sometimes, in the process, answers appear. In 2023, in a completely different part of Scotland, forestry workers clearing land for a wind farm project found human remains. They'd been there for over a decade, according to forensic analysis. A missing person case from 2011 was finally solved. The family got their answer. Not the answer they wanted, but an answer. Could something similar happen with James? Could forestry work in Ruttle Woods one day uncover what hundreds of searchers missed? Could a particularly dry summer expose something in the river? Could a routine dog walk lead to an unexpected discovery? Yes, all of these things are possible, but they require time and luck, and someone being in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. You can't engineer that. You can only wait. There's a question that people ask in cases like this. If you could know the truth, even if the truth was terrible, would you want to know? Or would you prefer to live with hope, however unrealistic that hope might be? Most families say they'd choose truth, because not knowing is its own kind of torture. At least with truth, you can grieve. You can process. You can eventually heal. But with uncertainty, you're frozen, unable to move backward or forward. There's a concept in psychology called closure. It's overused, often misunderstood. Closure doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean the pain goes away. It means you have enough information to build a narrative that makes sense, to integrate what happened into your understanding of the world. Without closure, events remain jagged, unprocessed. They don't fit anywhere. So your mind keeps circling back to them, trying to make sense of something that won't resolve. It's exhausting, and it never ends. James's family has been living without closure for more than 5 years. Birthdays have passed. Christmases have come and gone. Life has continued around the absence. But the absence is always there, a shape carved out of the fabric of their daily existence. People sometimes ask, why don't families of missing persons just move on? It's a question that reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. You can't move on from a question. Questions demand answers. They create psychological loops. And until the loop closes, you're stuck. The community around Beauly has moved on in the way communities do. New people have moved in. Others have moved away. Children born after 2019 are now in school, learning to read, oblivious to the fact that a man once vanished from the woods nearby. Life continues. But for those who remember, James's disappearance is a shadow that never quite lifts. There's a particular kind of sadness in seeing places associated with tragedy. You drive past Ruttle Woods and you think, somewhere in there, something happened. You can't see it. You can't point to it. But you know it's there. The woods don't look sinister. They look beautiful, peaceful even. On a summer day, with sunlight filtering through the trees and birds singing, it's easy to forget that this is a place where someone vanished. But the land remembers, even if we don't know what it's remembering. There's a memorial culture that develops around unsolved disappearances. Online communities keep the case alive. They share information, discuss theories, keep the person's name circulating. Family members post annual appeals on social media. Still missing, still loved, still searching for answers. And on significant dates, birthdays, anniversaries of the disappearance, people remember. For James Paton, there are threads on Reddit, posts on missing persons forums, occasional mentions in true crime podcasts. People who've never been to Scotland discuss what might have happened in Ruttle Woods. They mean well, most of them anyway. But there's a strange disconnect between online discussion of a case and the lived reality for the family. For people online, it's an intellectual puzzle, a mystery to solve. For the family, it's daily pain. Every theory someone posts, no matter how well-intentioned, is someone else speculating about their worst nightmare. This is the uncomfortable truth about true crime as entertainment. Every case that captivates us involves real people experiencing real suffering. And while awareness can sometimes help, tips can come from unexpected places, it can also feel like voyeurism. People consuming tragedy as content, which is why cases like James's matter in how they're told. Not as entertainment, not as a puzzle to solve, but as a reminder that behind every missing person poster is a human being. Someone who laughed, who had routines, who was loved, someone who deserves to be found. James Paton was 72 years old when he disappeared. He'd lived a full life by that point. Decades of experiences, relationships, memories. And then, in the space of a few hours on a December afternoon, all of that became past tense. Maybe. Because here's the thing we keep coming back to. We don't know he's dead. We believe he's dead, based on probability and time. But we don't know. And until someone finds proof, a body, remains, definitive evidence, there's that tiny, illogical sliver of possibility. What if James is alive? What if he's somewhere, unable to return, unable to communicate? What if he's waiting to be found, just like his family is waiting to find him. It's unlikely, vanishingly unlikely, but not impossible. And that's the torture of cases like this. The human mind can't fully let go of unlikely possibilities. We need certainty. We need proof. Without it, we're left with maybes and what-ifs and unanswered questions that echo forever. The River Beauly still flows through the Highlands. Ruttle Woods still stand, quiet and beautiful. The track where James's car was found still exists, probably unchanged. And somewhere, in the water, in the woods, in a place we haven't imagined, the answer to what happened on December 23, 2019, remains, waiting to be found. Just like James Paton. There's a photograph of James Paton that police released to the public. It shows an ordinary man. Gray hair, gray beard, glasses, a slight smile. The kind of face you'd pass in the street and nod to. The kind of face that doesn't suggest mystery or tragedy or disappearance. Just a man, living his life. But that photograph has become something else now. It's not just a picture of James. It's a missing person poster. A symbol. A question frozen in time. Every time someone sees it, they're seeing the last image of a man who walked into the woods and never came back. And that's what haunts about this case. Not the dramatic details, because there aren't any. Not the obvious suspects, because there aren't any. Not the clear motive or shocking revelation, because neither exists. What haunts is the ordinariness of it. December 23, 2019, started like any other Monday. James woke up. He went about his day. He decided to take his dog for a walk. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. Nothing that would make you think, this is the last normal moment. But somewhere between leaving his house and parking his car in Ruttle Woods, the ordinary became extraordinary. And we still don't know why. Let's go back to that afternoon one more time. Not to solve it, we can't. But to sit with what we know and what we don't. James is captured on CCTV at the filling station in Beauly at 1:30 p.m. He's alone in his car. His dog is with him. He's wearing his usual clothing. Practical, prepared for a winter walk. Nothing in that footage suggests distress. No unusual behavior. No indication that anything is wrong. He fills up. He pays. He leaves. Routine. He drives toward Ruttle Woods. We know this because his car was found there. But we don't know if he drove straight there, or if he stopped somewhere else first. We don't know if he spoke to anyone on the drive. We don't know if he made any calls. We just know he ended up on that track near Upper Fenelon. He parks the car. Neatly. Deliberately. The engine is turned off. The dog is inside. And then James gets out. This is the moment everything changes. This is the moment where the known becomes unknown. Where the timeline fractures. Where James Paton steps from the world we understand into the world we can't. What did he see when he got out of the car? The woods, familiar and quiet. The path ahead. The winter light already beginning to fade. Did he notice anything unusual? Did something catch his attention? Or was it just another walk? Unremarkable, until it wasn't. He leaves the dog in the car. We keep coming back to this detail because it doesn't fit any comfortable explanation. If he was going for a walk, why not take the dog? If he was checking something quickly, why hasn't he been found nearby? If he met someone, who? And where did they go? By 4:30 p.m., the car has been found. 3 hours. In 3 hours, James could have walked miles. Or he could have walked 50 meters and collapsed. In 3 hours, he could have had a conversation that changed everything. Or he could have been alone the entire time. In 3 hours, the line between alive and dead, present and missing, known and unknown, was crossed. And then the searches began. Hundreds of people, combing through woods and fields. Helicopters overhead. Dogs following scents that led nowhere. Days of intensive effort. Weeks. Months. And nothing. No body. No clothing. No signs of struggle. No evidence of James Paton beyond the car he left behind and the dog waiting inside. As if he simply ceased to exist. 5 years have passed since that December afternoon. 5 years of waiting. Wondering. Hoping against hope. 5 years of Christmas decorations going up in Beauly while a family marks another anniversary of absence. 5 years of the River Beauly flowing. The trees in Ruttle Woods growing. The seasons cycling through their endless pattern. The land has moved on. Nature doesn't pause for human tragedy. Where James once walked, new leaves have grown and fallen. New growth has covered old ground. If he's there, if his body lies somewhere in those woods, the forest has absorbed him by now, made him part of itself. And maybe that's the final truth we have to accept. That the Highlands don't give up their secrets easily. That some questions don't have answers, no matter how much we need them. That sometimes people vanish, and all we're left with is the echo of their absence. For James's family, the waiting continues. They've had to learn to live with uncertainty, to build a life around a question mark, to hold space for someone who might be dead, might be alive, might be somewhere no one has thought to look. They've had to endure well-meaning questions from people who don't understand. Have you tried? What about? Don't you think? As if there's some obvious solution they've missed. As if the police, the searchers, the family themselves haven't thought of everything 1,000 times over. They've had to watch other cases get solved. Other families get closure. Other missing persons found, one way or another. And wonder, why not us? Why not James? What makes our case the one that stays unsolved? There's no answer to that either. Some cases break open quickly. Some take decades. Some never resolve. And there's no logic to which is which. Just chance. Timing. The random intersection of circumstance and discovery. James Paton deserves to be found. Not because his case is more important than others. All missing persons deserve to be found. But because he was a person. He existed. He mattered. And the people who loved him deserve to know what happened. But deserving and receiving are different things. And sometimes, the universe doesn't provide what we deserve. Sometimes, we're left with fragments. With questions. With a story that has no ending. If you've made it this far in this story, you've spent the last 100 minutes with a question. What happened to James Paton? And the honest answer, the only answer anyone can give, is, we don't know. We may never know. But his story deserves to be told anyway. Because telling it keeps his memory alive. Because someone, somewhere, might know something. Because maybe, just maybe, the right person will hear this and remember a detail they didn't think was important. A car they saw on a track that December afternoon. A person walking alone in the woods. Something. If you know anything about James Paton's disappearance on December 23, 2019, please contact Police Scotland. No detail is too small. No memory is irrelevant. Even after 5 years, information can still make a difference. And if you've connected with this story, if it's moved you or made you think, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who appreciates thoughtful true crime storytelling. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people. And sometimes, that's how cases get solved, when the right person sees the right story at the right time. Drop a comment with your thoughts. What do you think happened? What questions do you still have? We read every comment, and your theories and perspectives add to the collective attempt to make sense of the senseless. James Paton is still out there. Somewhere. In the woods, in the river, in a place searchers walked past without seeing. Or somewhere else entirely, somewhere no one has imagined. The land knows. But the land doesn't speak. And so we're left with this. A 72-year-old man who left his home to walk his dog. Who drove to woods he knew well. Who parked his car on a familiar track. Who stepped out into the winter afternoon. And vanished. His dog waited in the car. Loyal. Patient. Uncomprehending. His family waited at home. First with concern. Then with panic. Then with the slow, crushing realization that he wasn't coming back. And now they wait still. 5 years later. Waiting for the call. The discovery. The answer. Waiting for the day the waiting finally ends. Somewhere in the vast, beautiful, unforgiving Scottish Highlands, the answer to what happened on December 23, 2019, still exists. Hidden in the soil. Beneath the water. In the memory of someone who hasn't spoken. James Paton left to take his dog for a walk. 3 days before Christmas. On an ordinary Monday afternoon. And he never came home. The silence that followed has lasted 5 years. And in the Highlands, where the wind carries no answers and the land keeps its secrets, that silence remains.